Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. J.K. Rowling's world is filled with vivid villains: Voldemort, Draco and Lucius Malfoy, Dolores Umbridge. But Bellatrix holds a special place among them. Fanatically loyal to the Dark Lord, cruel and ruthless, her character seems straightforward at first glance. But if you look closer, Bellatrix is surrounded by fascinating fan theories and hates, and today we're unpacking the most intriguing ones. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Bellatrix fought for Voldemort shortly after giving birth. There's a bit of confusion around the timeline into when exactly did Bellatrix give birth to her daughter Delphi, who, according to the cursed child, is Voldemort's child. It's known that Delphi was born roughly a year before the Battle of Hogwarts, meaning Bellatrix was already a mother when she fought for the Dark Lord. Fans often point to Tonks, who also fought in the battle, not long after childbirth. That makes this theory quite plausible. Bellatrix, driven by obsessive loyalty, would have fought to the end, even in a physically weakened state. Number 2. Harry's reaction to Bellatrix is amplified by the Horcrux. Why does Harry have such an intense emotional reaction whenever Bellatrix is around? One theory suggests it's due to the Horcrux within him. Harry is connected to Voldemort's thoughts, emotions, and perceptions, and Bellatrix is Voldemort's most devoted and trusted Death Eater. Of course, Harry hates her for killing Sirius, torturing Neville's parents, and her many other crimes. But why does her presence physically affect him, making his stomach turn? Perhaps through his link with Voldemort, he subconsciously senses her elevated status in the hierarchy of evil. Number 3. Bellatrix didn't have children with Rodolphus because of her devotion to the Dark Lord. The marriage between Bellatrix and Rodolphus Lestrange raises eyebrows among fans. There seems to be no real affection between them. They never had children, which is odd for a pure blood family obsessed with legacy. Some believe Bellatrix didn't allow herself to become unavailable for Voldemort's service. Pregnancy could have limited her freedom as a Death Eater. And for Bellatrix, nothing was more important than serving the Dark Lord. Number 4. Her marriage to Rodolphus was purely formal. There are even bolder theories, for instance, that Bellatrix felt absolutely nothing for Rodolphus. She married him out of necessity due to family pressure for status, but not for love. Her true feelings were solely directed at Voldemort. Obsession, almost religious worship. Her behavior makes that crystal clear. The marriage was merely a cover, a way to remain among the noble pure bloods. Number 5. She tortured the Longbottoms to find Harry. One of Bellatrix's darkest acts was torturing Neville's parents. But what if the goal wasn't just cruelty or revenge? After Voldemort's fall, Bellatrix, more than anyone, wanted to know what happened to him. Harry had been the last to face him. But where was the boy? There were no traces. Bellatrix may have believed that Order of the Phoenix members like the Longbottoms had this information and tried to extract it through torture. Number 6. She's not insane, just a fanatic. Many view Bellatrix as a mad witch, unhinged and out of control. But this theory offers another perspective. Yes, she's wild, theatrical, and seems to relish pain, but she's also logical, goal-oriented, and acts with purpose. Her madness is actually fanaticism taken to the extreme. She doesn't lose control. She deliberately chooses to follow Voldemort's will, seeing him as the meaning of her life. Number 7. Bellatrix is more evil than Voldemort himself. This is perhaps the most provocative theory of all. Think about it. Voldemort is a cold strategist, a calculating leader. He kills, yes, but mostly out of necessity, as a means to an end. But Bellatrix, she enjoys cruelty. She is aroused by the suffering of others. She doesn't just kill while she wants her victims to scream. Voldemort delegates the dirty work, but Bellatrix embraces it with glee. Number 8. Bellatrix deliberately lost the duel to Molly Weasley. Bellatrix laughed as she duelled Molly Weasley, laughed like it was a game. "What will happen to your children when I've killed you?" she taunted. Her wand moved fast, precise. She had killed before, without hesitation. But that final duel felt different. She danced too long, dodged too wide. She played until she didn't. In Deathly Hallows, Molly's fury exploded like fire. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" she roared. The room froze. Bellatrix smirked, but she didn't strike first. She waited, as if daring Molly, as if offering her the chance. Some fans believe Bellatrix wanted that end. Voldemort was losing, his army was breaking, the world she had fought for was slipping away. She would not go back to a cell. She would not wear chains again. She had seen Azkaban, felt it eat at her mind. She survived it once, barely. She would not survive it twice. A death in battle was pure, glorious, and better than silence in a prison cell. If she fell to a mother defending her child, so be it. That death had meaning, emotion, power. It was almost beautiful. Number 9, Bellatrix was the true heir to Slytherin's ideology. Bellatrix didn't just serve the Dark Lord, she served a cause. Pure blood supremacy wasn't a tactic for her, it was religion. In Order of the Phoenix, she spat the word mudblood with venom that felt older than war. Her eyes lit up when she spoke of bloodlines. Unlike Voldemort, who was half-blood himself, Bellatrix believed. Completely, fiercely. And that made her more Slytherin than the Dark Lord ever was. Voldemort used Slytherin's name like a banner. He spoke of blood purity, but he never lived by it. His closest followers weren't always pure. He trusted Snape, a half-blood. He created Horcruxes, abominations even Slytherin might have feared. Power was his only truth. Blood was a tool. Bellatrix, though, didn't bend. She scorned half-bloods. She despised Muggle-borns. Her hatred was old and absolute. She married Rodolphus Lestrange not for love, but for legacy, a union of ancient families. She bragged of her lineage. "The Blacks are the most noble house," she declared. She loathed Sirius, not just for betrayal, but for rejecting the family creed. She wasn't chasing immortality. She was chasing restoration, a world ruled by the old magic, by the pure. Number 10. Bellatrix was personally taught occlumency by Voldemort. Voldemort stood before her, eyes like slits, voice like smoke. "Clear your mind," he said. Bellatrix didn't flinch. The room around them was silent, thick with tension. According to this theory, she wasn't just a loyal follower, she was his student. He didn't trust many, but Bellatrix, fierce and fanatical, earned a place in his inner circle. Occlumency wasn't just a tool for Snape, it was a weapon, and Voldemort handed it to her directly. When Bellatrix faced Snape, she challenged him, questioned him, but he never truly saw into her mind. Even with his skill in legilimency, her thoughts were hidden, controlled. "You lost faith in him," she accused, yet never revealed her own secrets. That silence, that wall behind her madness, was built with training, with lessons taught in shadows, far from prying eyes. Dumbledore once tried to understand her. He questioned her in the aftermath of the Longbottoms' torture. But he found nothing, no regret, no cracks, just burning eyes and quiet rage. "The Dark Lord will rise again," she whispered, calm even in chains. That wasn't insanity, that was belief, shielded, buried deep by occlumency. She protected not only herself, but Voldemort's plans. Most Death Eaters followed. Bellatrix prepared. She knew occlumency wasn't just about defense, it was survival. The mind was the last fortress, and hers, trained by the Dark Lord himself, was impenetrable. Behind her laughter was a locked door, and behind that secrets no one, not even Snape, could ever touch. Number 11. Bellatrix intentionally spared Hermione at Malfoy Manor. Hermione screamed on the marble floor of Malfoy Manor. Bellatrix leaned over her like a shadow. Her wand never trembled. "How did you get that sword?" she demanded over and over. Her voice was cold, sharp, without mercy. But she didn't kill her. Not then, not even after Hermione refused to speak. Fans have always wondered why. Bellatrix hated Muggle-borns. She had every reason. And yet, Hermione lived. The truth may lie in Bellatrix's instincts. She saw what others missed. Hermione wasn't just another enemy. She was Harry Potter's heart. Killing her would have ended the game too early. Bellatrix wanted Harry broken, not just beaten. "Let's see how long this one lasts," she hissed in Deathly Hallows. The words weren't for cruelty alone. They were a signal. Hermione was bait. There was also the sword. Godric Gryffindor's blade should have been locked away in Gringotts. Yet there it was, in a muddy tent. Bellatrix panicked. Not because of Hermione, but because of Voldemort. If she failed to protect his treasures, she would pay. Torture wasn't just rage, it was delay. Time to think, time to understand, time to avoid death by her master's hand. She let Hermione live because death was too simple, too fast. Bellatrix preferred fear, silence, control. Killing Hermione would have ended the leverage. Keeping her alive meant Harry would come. He always did, and when he did, Bellatrix would be ready. Or so she thought. In the end, mercy was never part of it. Just strategy, just power, wrapped in screams. Number 12. Bellatrix and Sirius hated each other even before the war. They grew up under the same roof, the House of Black. Cold halls, heavy portraits, and pure-blood pride seeping through the walls. But Sirius and Bellatrix were never siblings in spirit. He rejected everything the family worshipped. She embraced it with fire. "My mother and father, they got the wrong sort," Sirius once said, bitterly. He ran away. She stayed behind and burned brighter. The war only gave them a reason to finish what started in childhood. In Grimmauld Place, her name was still on the family tree. His was scorched off. That one act said it all. To Bellatrix, Sirius was a traitor, a disgrace to blood, a stain. To Sirius, Bellatrix was madness in velvet, someone who worshipped cruelty and called it loyalty. They didn't just fight for different sides, they loathed what the other had become. The war turned them into enemies, but the hate was older, deeper. Their final meeting wasn't words, it was a duel, fast, sharp, and full of venom. In the Department of Mysteries, Bellatrix struck with glee. Her curse sent Sirius through the veil. She smiled, laughed. Come out, little Harry." She sang right after. There was no sorrow in her face, no second glance. To her, it wasn't murder, it was justice for the bloodline. That moment wasn't just a victory in battle, it was the end of a long family war. Bellatrix didn't kill an enemy of Voldemort. She killed the cousin she always hated, the boy who turned his back on the family name. And Sirius didn't die surprised. He died fighting someone he knew too well. Number 13. Bellatrix could have become the next Dark Lord after Voldemort. Bellatrix didn't need a crown. Her madness was enough. In the final moments of Voldemort's reign, she stood taller than any other Death Eater. While others hesitated, she charged into battle. While Lucius cowered, she cast curses like fire. Voldemort trusted no one, but he relied on Bellatrix. "My lord, let me do it," she whispered, more than once, hungry to act when others failed. If Voldemort had fallen earlier, who else could have filled the void? Rodolphus lacked presence. Greyback was a beast, not a leader. Even Severus Snape, powerful as he was, played both sides. Only Bellatrix showed unwavering loyalty. She didn't just serve, she worshipped, and in that worship she became terrifying. During the skirmish at the Department of Mysteries, She killed Sirius Black without flinching. "He's just behind the veil," she sang, laughing. That wasn't strategy, that was dominance. A leader unafraid of blood. Imagine if she had survived. The remnants of Voldemort's army scattered and leaderless. Bellatrix could have gathered them, whispering that the Dark Lord's spirit lived on in her. The Lestrange name still carried weight among purebloods. Her rage would have become religion. Her voice, the last echo of the Dark Lord's will. The world wouldn't have healed, it would have feared her. But Molly Weasley ended that path with a single spell. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" she screamed, and struck. Bellatrix's death was not just a victory, it was a warning. The future she might have built died with her, a future darker than anyone imagined, one where Voldemort's shadow wore lipstick and laughed as she burned the world. Number 14. Bellatrix deliberately provoked Narcissa to test her loyalty. In the drawing room of Malfoy Manor, Bellatrix's eyes burned like coals. She paced, circled, then turned to her sister with venom. "You dare speak to the Dark Lord about this, sissy?" Her voice was sharp, dangerous. Narcissa trembled but didn't look away. That moment, captured in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, wasn't just about fear, it was a test. Bellatrix wasn't scolding her sister. She was watching, weighing, judging. "The Dark Lord trusts me to bring him Potter," Narcissa had said. Bellatrix flinched, not with rage, but suspicion. Bellatrix had always been fiercely loyal to Voldemort, unquestioning, rabid. But she knew others weren't the same, especially her sister. Narcissa was too quiet, too careful. Married to Lucius, mother to Draco, she had things to lose. Bellatrix didn't. That made her dangerous and perceptive. She didn't lash out at Narcissa to hurt her. She pushed, provoked, searching for cracks. If Narcissa hesitated, it meant doubt, and doubt was betrayal. The scene with Snape proved everything. Narcissa begged him for an unbreakable vow. Bellatrix objected, but watched closely. "You're not going to do it?" she hissed. Snape's acceptance didn't just surprise Bellatrix. It confirmed her worst fears. Her sister had already made her own plans. She wasn't loyal to the cause, she was loyal to her son. Bellatrix's challenge had failed, but her suspicions were right. Narcissa wasn't one of them, not anymore. Later, during the Battle of Hogwarts, Narcissa lied to Voldemort about Harry being dead. That sealed it. Bellatrix would have never done that, never lied to her master, never risked the mission. But Narcissa did. For Draco. Bellatrix had sensed it long ago. That's why she'd kept the pressure. She had loved her sister, but loved Voldemort more. And in her mind, loyalty to him was the only truth that mattered. Number 15. Bellatrix possessed an ancient form of dark magic unknown even to Voldemort. It was never just loyalty that made Bellatrix Lestrange the most feared of Voldemort's Death Eaters. There was something unspoken in the way even seasoned followers like Lucius Malfoy hesitated in her presence. Something volatile, electric, ancient. "The Lestrange woman was mad," Remus Lupin once said in hushed tones, but those who duelled her knew that madness was not the source of her strength. There was an edge to her magic, a depth that Voldemort never bothered to explain. What if Bellatrix possessed knowledge that even the Dark Lord did not? Whispers in wizarding circles tell of a hidden form of dark magic, so old it predates Hogwarts itself. Known in hushed tones among certain unsavory scholars as the Moor's Lamenter, this forgotten strand of sorcery was said to be capable of manipulating pain and memory into physical weapons. The Ministry had long believed the secrets of Moor's Lamenter were lost during the Goblin rebellions. But in the damp, soul-sucking silence of Azkaban, Bellatrix Lestrange may have uncovered them again. It was in Azkaban that Bellatrix was truly forged into a creature of shadows. Unlike others, she never broke. The Dementors fed on fear, but Bellatrix was sustained by something else. "The Dark Lord will rise again," she screamed during her trial, eyes alight with fanaticism. But there was more behind those eyes than mere madness. Alone in her cell, surrounded by stone, rot, and despair, she reached deeper into her own hatred and into the few precious volumes she had smuggled in through dark sympathizers in the ministry. Among them, according to unconfirmed testimonies from a disgraced auror named Garrett Bryce, was a tome wrapped in dragon hide and sealed with blood magic. A book of the Antiquis Obscuris, the oldest known branch of unregulated spellcraft. A former cellmate of Bellatrix, a broken witch named Marla Trusk, who was later found dead in St. Mungo's psychiatric ward, muttered strange phrases in her sleep. She speaks to them. She calls them by name, the ones under the floor. Her babble, dismissed as the ravings of a ruined mind, included references to rituals involving bone powder, morning tears, and mirror shards soaked in the blood of unicorns, a clear violation of magical law and a sign that Bellatrix's education did not stop with standard curses and hexes. Her behavior after escaping Azkaban confirms this transformation. She moved through duels like a storm. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, Sirius Black, her own cousin and a seasoned fighter, was visibly caught off guard by the nature of her spells. Her incantations didn't just wound, they unraveled. A single word from her lips sent him hurtling through the veil of death. There was no incantation, no obvious spell, just a whispered syllable and a flick of her wrist. Was this a refined version of the Moor's Lamenter? Had she weaponized death itself? Even Lord Voldemort, for all his immense power, never displayed that particular form of spellcasting. When he duelled Dumbledore in the Ministry Atrium, his magic was grand and overwhelming, but recognizable. Fire, serpents, shattered glass. But Bellatrix? She operated on a different frequency. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Snape speaks to Narcissa with carefully veiled disdain for Bellatrix's growing fanaticism. She is devoted, he says, but his pause reveals unease. Snape, who had seen all forms of magic, seemed unsure whether her loyalty came from belief or something far darker. One curious piece of evidence lies in an obscure Death Eater report unearthed during the post-war trials. A captured snatcher, Marcus Kriebel, claimed that Bellatrix once performed a punishment ritual on a fellow Death Eater who had failed to secure a key objective. "She didn't use Cruciatus," he swore. "She said something in a tongue I've never heard. The man bled from his eyes and forgot who he was for 3 days. No record exists of such a spell in contemporary magical texts, but ancient Sumerian hexes noted in the Rituales Mortifera speak of precisely such a curse." Narcissa Malfoy, always the quieter sister, often tried to downplay Bellatrix's state of mind, but even she once confided to Snape, as Harry overheard from under his invisibility cloak, "She frightens me. I think she sees things." The implication was not madness, but visions, possible signs of prophecy or communication with unseen forces. Bellatrix's descent into this hidden magic might not have been purely academic. It may have had a spiritual dimension as well. In the final battle of Hogwarts, her duels were unmatched. She moved like a dancer, her eyes blazing with joy at every death she delivered. Molly Weasley, her eventual killer, described her as burning with a fire I'd never seen before, like something was feeding her. That something could well have been the dark magic she embraced in prison. Some spells do not merely drain your energy, they make you a vessel. And Bellatrix had long since emptied herself of conscience. A particularly compelling moment came when Hermione Granger, disguised as Bellatrix via Polyjuice potion tried to enter Gringotts. The goblins were immediately suspicious, not just because of appearance, but because Hermione could not replicate Bellatrix's presence. "She's wrong," one goblin growled. They sensed it. Magic is not only seen, it is felt, and Bellatrix's aura had become a creature of its own. So ancient, perhaps, that it was recognizable only by the oldest beings in the wizarding world. Bellatrix's wand, a dragon heartstring 12 3/4 inches, unyielding, was as intense as its mistress. Ollivander once said, "The wand chooses the wizard, but in rare cases, cases like Bellatrix's, the wand becomes a reflection of the soul. And if her soul was filled with knowledge lost to time and burned from history, then her wand became a relic of something primal, not just dark, but elemental." Some speculate that the Mors Lamenta required communion with entities that predated even magic itself, spirits bound to pain and mourning. That might explain why Bellatrix often laughed when killing, even in moments of complete rage. It was not joy, but a release, a ritual. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when she tortured Hermione, she cut her slowly and purposefully, using a knife rather than magic. Was this a symbolic offering? A step in some hidden rite? Number 16. Bellatrix intentionally targeted Dumbledore's most loyal supporters. There is a certain madness in Bellatrix Lestrange that is impossible to ignore. Her laughter, sharp and manic, echoes through the halls of the Department of Mysteries like a song of death. Yet beneath that chaos, behind the wild eyes and cruel smile, lies a mind both cunning and purposeful. Those who label her merely a loyal servant to Voldemort overlook something far more terrifying. Bellatrix was not just a follower. She was a strategist in a different kind of war, a war against hope itself. Consider the death of Sirius Black. To many, it was a tragic loss, a burst of spontaneous violence in the chaos of battle. But for Bellatrix, it was the calculated removal of a symbol, a godfather, a protector, and the last true link Harry Potter had to his family. The way she struck, the way she smiled as he disappeared behind the veil, tells us something more. "Come on, you can do better than that," she taunted Harry, mere moments before the fatal spell. Her cruelty was not random, it was personal. And her choice of target was not merely convenient, it was strategic. Sirius was no ordinary rebel. He was Dumbledore's bridge to the younger generation, a former member of the original Order of the Phoenix, a man whose bloodline connected him to the pure-blood aristocracy, yet whose heart defied everything Voldemort stood for. In Sirius, the resistance had a voice of rebellion, one that could not be silenced by fear. Killing him did more than remove a duelist from the battlefield. It crushed a piece of Harry's heart. As Dumbledore himself would later confess in Half-Blood Prince, "You care so much you feel as though you will bleed to death with the pain of it." But Sirius was not Bellatrix's first blow, nor was he her last. To truly understand the depth of her malice, one must look back to the fall of Frank and Alice Longbottom, two of the bravest auras of their time and Dumbledore's most steadfast allies during the First Wizarding War. Their fate was not death, which might have been mercy, but madness, a fate Bellatrix dealt with unflinching delight. She and her husband, along with the Carrows, tortured the Longbottoms into insanity, using the Cruciatus curse, their minds shattered beyond repair. Neville Longbottom would grow up visiting parents who no longer recognized him. "He doesn't need to hear about that," Augusta Longbottom snapped when the truth was revealed in Order of the Phoenix. But Neville already knew. Everyone did, and Bellatrix knew what she had done. When she later encountered Neville in the Department of Mysteries, her reaction was not fear, but mockery. "Neville Longbottom, is it? How's Mum and Dad?" Her voice dripped with contempt, but underneath it was the cruel satisfaction of someone who had destroyed something irreplaceable. These were not coincidental attacks. This was psychological warfare. Bellatrix Lestrange had a gift for striking where the damage could not be undone. She wasn't content with physical victory. She wanted to rot her enemies from the inside. With the Longbottoms, she didn't just remove 2 auras from the battlefield. She left behind a child haunted by grief, forever reminded of what the war had stolen. And that child, once quiet and unsure, would grow into a hero fueled by pain. But Bellatrix could never have known that then. In every war, there are soldiers, and then there are saboteurs. Bellatrix, with her thirst for destruction, knew that weakening the Order of the Phoenix didn't always mean defeating them in open combat. Sometimes it meant eroding their foundations, removing their pillars of hope, leaving only silence in the places where voices once gave strength. Dumbledore, for all his wisdom, could not shield them from such intimate forms of attack. Her selection of victims was far too precise to be ignored. Sirius, the Godfather, the Longbottoms, the Auras. But even beyond the battlefield, Bellatrix left scars. She targeted Tonks, her own niece, not out of some spontaneous rage, but because Tonks had chosen love and decency over bloodline and darkness. Her marriage to Remus Lupin was an act of rebellion that Bellatrix loathed. She called Tonks a blood traitor and spat on her union with a werewolf. Though she did not kill Tonks personally, her hatred was clear, and her manipulation of Narcissa in Half-Blood Prince reveals her knowledge of Tonks's vulnerability. There is something haunting in how Bellatrix speaks about love. "You filthy half-blood," she screams at Hermione in Deathly Hallows, just before carving the word mudblood into her skin. But more than the insult, it is the need to humiliate, to desecrate, that marks Bellatrix's approach to war. She does not seek only to kill. She seeks to make symbols bleed. Hermione was never just a student. She was Harry's anchor, Ron's conscience, and a face of the future they fought for. By torturing her, Bellatrix tried to stain the very ideals the Order protected. Her efforts weren't limited to individuals. When she fought at the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, she didn't merely duel. She destroyed. Laughing madly, she set fire to Hagrid's hut. The choice of target was not tactical. It was symbolic. Hagrid, the half-giant who welcomed Harry into the magical world, who housed students, cared for magical creatures, and offered kindness in a dark time. His home was a sanctuary, and Bellatrix turned it to ash. Again, it was not a strategic gain, but a spiritual loss. In a world of death and shadows, the warmth of Hagrid's cabin was a reminder that goodness endured. Bellatrix made sure it didn't. Number 17. Bellatrix knew that Harry Potter was a Horcrux. Of all the figures who surrounded Lord Voldemort during his rise and fall, none were as frighteningly devoted, as feverishly loyal, as utterly consumed by the Dark Lord's presence as Bellatrix Lestrange. Her eyes, always wild with an eerie blend of devotion and madness, rarely strayed far from him. But what if her obsession ran deeper than mere fanaticism? What if it was rooted in knowledge, terrible, forbidden knowledge? One of the most provocative theories whispered among Harry Potter fans is this, that Bellatrix knew the darkest of Voldemort's secrets, that Harry Potter himself was a Horcrux. Bellatrix's connection to Voldemort went beyond admiration. It bordered on spiritual possession. She addressed him with reverence, spoke of him as though he were a god. my lord," she would murmur, trembling at his every word. Her devotion was unmatched even among Death Eaters, and it begs a question. Was she simply a worshipper, or was she a confidant? Voldemort, by nature, trusted no one. And yet Bellatrix held a unique position in his inner circle, closer, at times even, than Snape. She was the only one he allowed to remain at his side during deeply personal moments, such as the torture of the Longbottoms or the final attack on the Department of Mysteries. The theory gains power when we consider how Bellatrix behaved toward Harry. Despite having countless opportunities, she never attempted to kill him directly. In the Department of Mysteries, for instance, she fought fiercely with deadly force, but when face-to-face with Harry, her approach changed. "You have to mean it, Potter," she taunted when daring him to use the Cruciatus curse. "You need to really want to cause pain or to enjoy it." She played with him, she provoked, but she never tried to strike him down. And that is unusual for a woman who never hesitated to kill. Bellatrix murdered Sirius Black, her own cousin, without flinching. She tortured Hermione Granger with a sadistic glee that left even fellow Death Eaters uneasy. Her cruelty knew no bounds, and yet Harry was often met with spells to disarm or restrain, never to destroy. Could this restraint be rooted not in hesitation, but in calculation? Could it be that Bellatrix, alone among the Death Eaters, knew that Harry's death would destroy something Voldemort needed to survive? To explore this possibility, we must return to Voldemort's understanding of Horcruxes. He created 7 fragments of his soul, placing them in various objects: the diary, the locket, the cup, the diadem, Nagini, and Harry. But Harry's status as a Horcrux was not intentional. It was a mistake born of Voldemort's arrogance and desperation. He never told anyone, not even his most trusted followers. And yet, someone must have suspected, someone who understood the link between Harry and Voldemort. The shared thoughts, the dreams, the scar that burned. Snape suspected something, but his thoughts never fully articulated the truth. Dumbledore uncovered the secret late in his life, only after extensive study. But Bellatrix, she had access to knowledge no one else did. She was present when Voldemort used dark magic. She witnessed his most secret rituals. She knew of the diary, of the cup, of the locket. Her own vault at Gringotts guarded one of the Horcruxes, Helga Hufflepuff's cup, a gift she protected with near religious devotion. Was this just loyalty, or was it informed by understanding? Consider the scene in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when Harry, Hermione, and Ron are captured and taken to Malfoy Manor. Bellatrix panics when she sees the sword of Gryffindor. "Where did you get that?" she screams, her voice shrill with horror. "That sword is supposed to be in my vault at Gringotts." Her fear is not just for the loss of treasure. It is for the violation of something sacred, something she knows Voldemort cherishes. She demands they be imprisoned until she can confirm whether the vault has been breached. Why such terror over a sword? Because the sword guards the secret, and the secret guards the soul. Her behavior in that moment betrays more than fear. It betrays knowledge. She understands that something precious, something forbidden, has been threatened. When Voldemort later discovers that the cup is missing, his fury is absolute. He begins to feel true fear. But Bellatrix felt it first. She felt it when she saw the sword and knew what it could mean. Her scream, her panic, were not those of a loyal follower. They were those of someone who held a secret too large to lose. Voldemort trusted her with the cup, not Lucius Malfoy, not Severus Snape, not even Barty Crouch Jr., only Bellatrix. Why? Because she alone had the fanaticism to protect it, and the intelligence to understand what it was. Her devotion wasn't just blind faith, it was the devotion of someone guarding the key to immortality. And if she knew about the cup, could she not also have known, or at least suspected, about the boy? Another moment speaks volumes. During the final battle at Hogwarts, Bellatrix duels with Hermione, Ginny, and Luna. She is relentless, but when Harry appears, her attention shifts. Her attacks are chaotic, furious, but again she never attempts to finish him. Even in that ultimate confrontation she spares him. Instead she focuses on killing others. Her final moment comes not from Harry's wand, but from Molly Weasley's. "Not my daughter, you bitch." And just like that, Bellatrix is gone. But not before making one final glance toward Harry, not of hatred, but of something else. Recognition, perhaps. What if, in those last seconds, she knew that everything was unraveling, that the boy she was forbidden to touch would now be free to destroy the man she worshipped, that all the pieces she had guarded were crumbling? If Bellatrix knew Harry was a Horcrux, then her entire story takes on new depth. Her cruelty was not random, it was carefully directed. Her restraint was not weakness, it was strategy. Her loyalty was not madness, it was mission. Number 18, Bellatrix saw Voldemort not just as a leader, but as a messiah. Of all the followers Lord Voldemort ever commanded, none were as blindly devoted, some might say religiously fanatical, as Bellatrix Lestrange. To her, Voldemort wasn't merely a powerful wizard leading a revolution, he was a savior, a messiah chosen by fate to cleanse the magical world from the impurities of blood treason and muggle-born intrusion. This adoration went far beyond loyalty. Bellatrix's every word, every action dripped with a mysticism that placed Voldemort on a pedestal reserved for the divine. It wasn't enough to serve him, she had to worship him. Bellatrix's belief in Voldemort's divine mission manifested early, even before her imprisonment in Azkaban. Born into the proud black family, she was already immersed in the ideology of blood purity. But while her relatives, like Narcissa, and even the cold-hearted Lucius Malfoy, adhered to these beliefs for status and power, Bellatrix embraced them with spiritual fervor. Voldemort, in her eyes, embodied these ideals with celestial clarity. He was not simply a leader, he was the one destined to restore the ancient order. When he offered her the dark mark, she accepted it not as a sign of servitude, but as a sacred symbol, like a cross pressed into flesh. During the First Wizarding War, Bellatrix was a name whispered in fear, not only because of her cruelty, but because of the wild, unhinged laughter that followed her spells. There was something almost ecstatic in the way she killed, as if every Avada Kedavra was an offering to her lord. After Voldemort's first fall, she did not betray him, as so many others did. Instead, she willingly followed him into ruin. In the ministry courtroom, she stood unrepentant, declaring to a stunned public, "The Dark Lord will rise again, Crouch. Throw us into Azkaban, we will wait." It was not a plea, it was prophecy. Her 13 years in Azkaban only strengthened this fanaticism. While others withered and lost their minds in the presence of the Dementors, Bellatrix seemed to thrive. She was not just surviving imprisonment, she was meditating in a spiritual desert, waiting for her god to return. When Voldemort finally did rise again, it was Bellatrix who rejoiced with the zeal of an apostle who had seen a resurrection. "Master, I knew you would come back," she whispered, trembling the moment she laid eyes on him again. Her voice was not that of a subordinate, it was the breathless awe of a worshipper standing before her deity. The other Death Eaters respected Voldemort, they feared him. But Bellatrix's love bordered on spiritual possession. Her obsession was not sexual, though it is often reduced to that in fan circles, but ritualistic. In her, Voldemort had something more dangerous than a follower. He had a zealot. In the Department of Mysteries, she toyed with Sirius Black, not just because he was her cousin and a traitor, but because eliminating him was, in her view, a righteous act. She shouted, "You should have stayed away, blood traitor!" as if purging him were a sacrament. Her actions during that battle are particularly revealing. When Harry Potter taunted her that Voldemort was a half-blood, she snapped. "Liar!" she screamed, her eyes wide with horror. The idea that her Messiah could share blood with Muggles was unbearable heresy to her religion. It wasn't about facts anymore, it was about belief. If Voldemort was her Messiah, he had to be pure, untouchable. To suggest otherwise was to commit blasphemy. Dumbledore once said that indifference and neglect often do more damage than outright dislike. But Bellatrix was not indifferent nor neglectful. She was entirely consumed. This is why she tortured the Longbottoms to insanity, not just to extract information, but as a blood offering. She believed the act would summon Voldemort back. In that moment, she was more priestess than soldier, more oracle than assassin. She inflicted suffering with reverence, convinced that her lord was watching, perhaps even listening. Even among Death Eaters, Bellatrix's devotion was disturbing. Snape, with his quiet, measured words, regarded her with contempt. Lucius Malfoy, cunning and practical, feared her unpredictability. When Narcissa asked Bellatrix to accompany her to Snape's home, Bellatrix did not go as a sister. She went as a watchdog of the faith, questioning Snape's loyalty with the intensity of an inquisitor. "Why did you stay away so long?" she demanded. "Where were you when the Dark Lord fell?" Every syllable burned with the fire of a believer interrogating an apostate. Her fanaticism reached its crescendo at Malfoy Manor. When Hermione was captured, Bellatrix did not simply interrogate her. She carved the word mudblood into her skin, an act not just of cruelty, but of dogma. Bellatrix wasn't trying to get answers. She was purifying her victim through pain, as if performing an exorcism. It was torture as ritual hatred cloaked in holiness. Even Voldemort, who had no interest in religion, recognized her passion and perhaps saw its danger. Ironically, Voldemort did not return her devotion. He saw Bellatrix as useful, but expendable. She was a blade to wield, not a soul to cherish. When she killed Sirius, Voldemort neither praised nor comforted her. But Bellatrix needed no praise. She believed in him as others believe in destiny. During the final battle at Hogwarts, she fought not like a soldier, but like a prophet whose world would collapse if her lord fell. "You'll never touch him!" she screamed when Ginny Weasley duelled her. In that moment, Bellatrix wasn't just defending Voldemort. She was defending her faith. Her death, when it finally came at the hands of Molly Weasley, was as shocking as it was symbolic. Molly, a mother defending her daughter, struck with the power of love, something Bellatrix neither understood nor believed in. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" Molly roared, and Bellatrix exploded into death. It was a clash of ideologies, fanaticism versus humanity, cold devotion versus warm protection. Bellatrix's death was not just a personal defeat, it was the collapse of her entire spiritual worldview. It's easy to dismiss Bellatrix as insane, to see her cackling laughter and cruel spells as nothing more than symptoms of madness. But madness, in her case, was shaped by belief. She didn't serve Voldemort because she was weak or manipulated. She served him because she saw in him a divine destiny. In that sense, she was not a villain in her own eyes. She was a disciple, a chosen one, helping birth a new world. And there's something tragic in Bellatrix's story, not because she deserved redemption, but because she was incapable of seeing the truth. Even in her final moments, when the tide of battle had turned and Voldemort was cornered, she did not question him. She remained certain, unshaken. That kind of blind faith is terrifying. It creates monsters who kill in the name of righteousness. Bellatrix was not born evil. She became evil by believing too deeply in a lie. In the end, Voldemort's greatest weapon was not the Elder Wand or the Horcruxes. It was people like Bellatrix who turned belief into obedience and obedience into atrocity. Her loyalty was not won through fear or ambition, but through spiritual ecstasy, and that made her the most dangerous Death Eater of all. Bellatrix's fanaticism holds a mirror to real-world extremism. When people elevate a leader to godhood, they stop asking questions. They start justifying anything. Bellatrix didn't just follow orders, she celebrated them. She didn't just kill for Voldemort, she worshipped the killing because it made her feel closer to him. There is no redemption in such darkness, only the horrifying realization that love, when twisted, can become something monstrous. The books never fully explain why Bellatrix felt this way. J.K. Rowling leaves much of her inner world unsaid, but the clues are there, scattered like breadcrumbs: her upbringing, her zeal, her unflinching gaze at Voldemort, and most of all, her belief that she was part of something greater than herself. In that belief, she found purpose. In that purpose, she found destruction. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore says, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Bellatrix chose devotion over doubt. She chose cruelty over compassion, not because she had to, but because she believed it was sacred. And that is what makes her not just a villain, but a warning. Her name, Bellatrix, means female warrior in Latin. But she was more than a warrior. She was a crusader, a high priestess of death, who saw every spell, every scream, every death as a hymn to her god. And like all crusaders blinded by devotion, she fell not because of her enemies, but because she had lost sight of the truth. Even now, readers debate her motives. Was it love, obsession, madness? But perhaps the answer is simpler and darker. Bellatrix Lestrange saw Voldemort as the Messiah. And once you declare someone a Messiah, there's no limit to what you'll do in their name. Number 19. Bellatrix had her own secret informant inside the Order of the Phoenix. Bellatrix Lestrange was not simply the wild-eyed madwoman the Order of the Phoenix believed her to be. Beneath the surface of cackling cruelty and flamboyant sadism may have hidden a mind far more strategic than most gave her credit for. There are whispers, faint echoes among the pages and passages, that Bellatrix had her own private source of information within the Order itself, a spy, a traitor, or perhaps just someone careless enough to speak too loudly in the wrong place. Whatever the truth, there is something that makes us wonder. How did Bellatrix always seem to be exactly where she needed to be? It was not just coincidence that she found herself face to face with Hermione, Ron, and Harry after they were captured in the forest. Nor was it chance that she knew the precise moment the trio had infiltrated Gringotts, and more so that they were seeking something related to her own vault. While Voldemort might have sensed the theft of his Horcrux, Bellatrix's reaction upon learning they had been inside her vault was one of true horror, not just surprise. "What else did you take? What else?" she screamed, a question that revealed fear, not for herself, but for something deeper, something secret. Some argue she was simply acting out of loyalty to the Dark Lord. But perhaps the real reason she was so terrified was because she already knew what was inside the vault. And perhaps she knew someone had been sniffing around before the break-in. Gringotts was well guarded, but not impenetrable. And if someone in the Ministry had heard rumblings of a plan, if someone whispered to Bellatrix in confidence, would that not explain why she became so protective of the vault so suddenly? Consider the events at the Department of Mysteries. Bellatrix led the Death Eaters into the heart of the Ministry to intercept the prophecy. It's widely believed that Voldemort orchestrated this, but it's curious how quickly the Death Eaters arrived, seemingly moments after Harry and his friends. "He's got Padfoot at the place where it's hidden," Harry had dreamt. But who passed this message to Voldemort? The connection through Harry's scar was one method, yes, but did Bellatrix get wind of it first? It's not impossible to think she had access to someone like Broderick Bode. Before he was cursed and ultimately killed by a devil's snare, Bode was a ministry worker assigned to the Department of Mysteries. He was imperious, and then silenced forever. But who ordered his murder? Was it Lucius? Or could Bellatrix have had her own hand in it? She had always shown a willingness to act independently, even recklessly, if the cause served Voldemort and herself. One name that floats to the surface more than once is Mundungus Fletcher, a petty thief, unreliable and far too eager to slip into the shadows with someone else's silverware. He was part of the Order, yes, but how trusted was he really? Sirius never liked him. He's always been a dodgy one, Sirius once said. Could Bellatrix have reached him, promised him gold, protection, or even something darker? After all, it was his negligence that allowed the locket Horcrux to fall into Umbridge's hands. Did he give Bellatrix more than just stolen goods? But perhaps it wasn't a turncoat at all. Perhaps it was someone inside the ministry, someone young, unnoticed, and desperate to impress. Bellatrix came from an old, noble house. Her influence ran deep. She might have charmed, seduced, or threatened a low-level clerk into giving her just enough scraps of intelligence to be dangerous. The Department of Magical Transportation, the Flu Network Authority, the Office for the Detection and Confiscation of Counterfeit Defensive Spells, all minor departments, but each with ears and eyes in unexpected places. Could someone have slipped her the schedule of order meetings? Could someone have betrayed them without even realizing what they were doing? Think of how she tracked Neville Longbottom. She taunted him about his parents, yes, but she also seemed to take a particular interest in him beyond cruelty. She hunted him, some said. She watched him. It wasn't just vengeance for what his parents had done. Bellatrix had a strategy. She sensed something in Neville, a potential threat. And while her obsession with the Longbottoms was rooted in her past, her actions in the Second Wizarding War suggested she had access to information about where Neville was and what he was doing that was too precise to be random. At Hogwarts, during the Carrow regime, Neville resisted. He was defiant. But Bellatrix had predicted this. She had once told Snape, "He'll be a little Gryffindor hero, just like his parents." And sure enough, that's exactly what he became. Did she have someone at the school reporting back to her? Or perhaps she instructed the Carrows to focus specifically on him, not out of revenge, but to crush a future enemy? Then there is the night at Malfoy Manor. Bellatrix was the one who interrogated Hermione with such precision, not just brutality, but surgical cruelty. "You're lying," she snarled. "You've been inside my vault." How could she know that? The trio had been captured, yes, but they hadn't confessed. Not fully. But Bellatrix knew, she felt it, or perhaps she had heard it already, from someone who had seen the children snooping in Diagon Alley, or even heard them speak of it in whispers. There's also a peculiar moment during the escape from Privet Drive. Multiple decoy Harrys flew across the sky, but somehow the Death Eaters knew exactly where the real one was. "I'm telling you, I saw Potter!" shouted one of the Death Eaters. But did Bellatrix know before anyone else? The plan was guarded tightly within the Order. Only a few knew the details. Could someone have let it slip? Or could Bellatrix have planted a listening spell somewhere, on an object, a bird, a person? Snape had warned them all. The Dark Lord has spies everywhere. But the real question is, were they all Voldemort's spies, or did some report directly to Bellatrix? We must not forget how passionately she hated Tonks, not just because she had married a werewolf, but because she was a blood traitor, a disgrace to the noble House of Black. But there was venom in Bellatrix's attacks on Tonks that suggested something deeper. She seemed to know when Tonks was vulnerable. She seemed to sense when she was pregnant. And she struck when it would hurt the most. The Battle of Hogwarts. The perfect moment to kill. Not for the sake of the war, but for her own twisted sense of personal vengeance. Did she learn this from Voldemort, or from someone else? Even within the Death Eater ranks, Bellatrix held her own counsel. She mocked others, undermined them, and acted independently. When Voldemort wasn't watching, she took matters into her own hands. She didn't need instructions, she needed opportunity. And opportunity often comes from inside information. There's another unsettling moment. In Half-Blood Prince, Bellatrix accompanies Narcissa to Spinner's End. She confronts Severus Snape, challenging his loyalty. "You lost the Dark Lord's trust," she said. "You disappeared after the Dark Lord fell." She was protective, calculating, and yet she agreed, grudgingly, to let Snape make the unbreakable vow. Why? Because she couldn't afford to act openly against him, not without proof. Was she hoping to catch him in a lie? Was she, perhaps, already aware that Snape was playing both sides and was simply trying to figure out how much he knew? This suspicion led some to believe that Bellatrix operated her own web of watchers. Perhaps not all were official Death Eaters. Some may have been mere sympathizers. Some may have been enchanted, coerced, or blackmailed. She had many tools beyond her wand: fear, influence, and knowledge. And in the wizarding world, knowledge is the deadliest weapon of all. We often underestimate her because of her madness, but madness can be a mask, a convenient excuse to hide method. She laughed too much, yes, but she also listened. She screamed, but she also observed. She tortured, but she also questioned. Bellatrix was not only the fist of Voldemort, she may have been his eyes and ears as well. What if the person feeding her information wasn't in the Order itself, but adjacent to it? Someone like Aberforth Dumbledore who, while loyal, kept his distance. Or even someone like Hestia Jones or Daedalus Diggle, less central, less guarded? Perhaps they were compromised without ever knowing it. A forgotten letter, a misplaced mirror, a spell gone unnoticed. In the end, we don't have the parchment trail proof that Bellatrix had a secret informant. But there are too many coincidences, too many precise attacks, too many moments when she knew too much. And while Voldemort had his own network, Bellatrix was never content to be just another servant. She wanted to be the queen beside the king, and queens, as every chess master knows, are the most dangerous pieces on the board. So next time you picture Bellatrix Lestrange as merely the deranged killer of Sirius Black, imagine her instead in a shadowed room, reading a letter inked in invisible script, handed to her by a trembling hand in a ministry corridor. Picture her whispering spells over a flu connection, eyes narrowed, lips curled in a smile. She was many things: cruel, fanatical, terrifying. But above all, she may have been far more clever than we ever dared to imagine. Number 20. Bellatrix used forbidden potions to enhance her magic. There was something deeply unhinged about Bellatrix Lestrange that no spell could replicate. It wasn't just her cackling laughter or the cruel joy she took in her enemy's pain. It wasn't just her fanatical devotion to the Dark Lord. There was something else, a feral, unrelenting fire behind her eyes, a frightening ecstasy that burned during battle. Some say it was madness. Others, more suspicious, whisper of something darker, that Bellatrix fueled her dark magic not only with hatred and obsession, but with forbidden potions. Some even claim the madness was chemically induced. Fans have long speculated that Bellatrix's strength and resistance in duels, especially during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, was not just a testament to her skill, but the result of rare and ancient elixirs. These potions, passed down from the secret archives of the noble House of Black, or perhaps created through Bellatrix's own terrifying experiments, might explain her unnatural resilience and erratic behavior. "The Dark Lord has taught me things you can't even dream of," she once hissed at Harry, her eyes gleaming with maniacal delight. But perhaps not all those teachings were magical spells. Bellatrix descended from a pure-blood lineage known for their obsession with power and secrecy. The Black family's library contained not only magical theory but also handwritten grimoires filled with forbidden lore dating back to the early days of the wizarding world. While Burger Black, Sirius's mother, kept several rooms of their mansion warded with permanent locking spells, rooms that even Creature dared not enter. Could it be that Bellatrix, during her youth, discovered one such room and uncovered the ancient alchemical knowledge hidden from the rest of the world? The signs are all there. When she escaped from Azkaban, thin, skeletal, and haunted, she recovered quickly, too quickly. Most former prisoners never fully regain their strength after even a few months in that soul-crushing place. Bellatrix had endured over a decade, and yet, when she reappeared by Voldemort's side, she looked not just alive, but renewed. "The Lestranges should stand here," Voldemort declared at the graveyard in Goblet of Fire. "They went to Azkaban rather than renounce me." Bellatrix beamed at his words, her eyes wild. How did she return from that place with her strength intact? Potions exist in the wizarding world to dull pain, amplify courage, or suppress fear. But the creation of such mixtures, especially those that work in combat, requires both rare ingredients and immense knowledge. Horace Slughorn taught students about the dangerous properties of Felix Felicis and Amortentia, but even he never dared speak of the potions Bellatrix might have used. The Department of Mysteries catalogued cases where dark wizards used concoctions to block pain receptors, allowing them to fight without restraint. But these potions often destroyed the user's sanity. Perhaps that's why Bellatrix always looked so detached from reality. Her laugh during combat was too joyous, too chaotic. Her eyes seemed constantly dilated. During the duel with Sirius, she danced rather than dodged. She didn't block spells, she let them pass by inches, as if taunting fate. Sirius's final moments were marked by her laughter. "Come on, you can do better than that," he shouted. Her reply was not words, but a twisted grin and a killing curse. When Harry chased her through the ministry afterward, she didn't run like someone afraid. She screamed, she laughed, she played. "I killed Sirius Black," she sang. "Did you love him, little baby Potter?" No sane person mocks a grieving child moments after committing murder, unless they are utterly lost in something beyond morality. Could she have been under the influence of a potion that removed the weight of consequence, of guilt? The Black family was known to practice blood rituals, arcane spells intertwined with potion brewing. It is rumoured that Druella Rosier, Bellatrix's mother, was a master of shadow elixirs, potions that were outlawed during the establishment of the International Statute of Secrecy. One such brew, nicknamed Umbra Noctis, was believed to make the drinker immune to emotional magic, such as the effects of Veritaserum, Legilimency, or even love potions. Bellatrix, famously, was unaffected by guilt, remorse, or grief. Could she have ingested something that permanently altered her perception? Her interactions with Voldemort suggest a kind of frenzied worship. "My lord," she would whisper, sinking to her knees, "I am your most loyal servant." Her obsession bordered on erotic ecstasy. Narcissa, her sister, once glanced at her in horror during Half-Blood Prince, when Bellatrix spoke of the Dark Lord's perfection with trembling hands. That kind of devotion is unnatural, even by Death Eater standards. Some believe she consumed elixirs laced with basilisk venom or thestral blood, ingredients that warp the mind, breaking natural fear and forging new loyalties. One incident, buried in oral records, describes Bellatrix single-handedly taking down 3 trained enforcers during a raid near Little Hangleton. According to retired Aura Wilhelmina Tuft, we hit her with 3 stunning spells in a row. She absorbed them, didn't even flinch. Then she laughed like we'd told a joke and cursed Jones in the chest. I've never seen anything like it. No known shield spell allows such resistance. But a potion, one brewed with troll fat, powdered dragon heart and powdered phoenix feather, might do the trick. Even her time in Azkaban raises questions. Dementors feed on hope, joy, and memories of love. Yet Bellatrix remained loyal to Voldemort unbroken. While others faded into madness or silence, she grew sharper. Her letters to Narcissa during this time, some later intercepted by the Ministry, were erratic and vivid, often discussing the burning path and the blood songs that echo when the potion stings. Was she smuggling elixirs into Azkaban? Or did she take something before her imprisonment that fortified her mind against despair? Voldemort himself was an expert in manipulation, but even he expressed both admiration and caution toward Bellatrix. In The Half-Blood Prince, he entrusted Severus Snape with his most secret plans. Bellatrix protested violently. "Why him?" she shrieked. "You know I am your most faithful!" Voldemort didn't deny her loyalty, only reminded her, gently, that Snape's path was different. His tone was that of a man humoring a dangerous weapon, one that might explode at any moment. He knew she was not entirely stable. Was it simply her obsession, or something brewing beneath her skin? In Malfoy Manor, during the final days before the Battle of Hogwarts, she became more paranoid, more volatile. When Hermione was brought to her, Bellatrix carved the word mudblood into her arm. Such sadism was unnecessary. It wasn't just cruelty, it was ritualistic. Her hands shook with excitement as she did it. Her voice trembled not with fear, but anticipation. Narcissa looked away. Even Fenrir Greyback was silent. Only someone under the influence of mind-altering substances could derive such rapture from torture. Snape, whose mastery of potions was unmatched, once described Bellatrix as unhinged but fiercely talented. He refused to duel her even during training exercises among Death Eaters. In a private conversation overheard by Draco, Snape once muttered, "She doesn't bleed like others. I don't know what's in her blood anymore." Coming from Snape, such a statement is chilling. It suggests even he suspected she was no longer entirely human. It is possible that Bellatrix crafted her own variants of existing brews. A corrupted draught of peace could numb empathy while maintaining clarity. An inverted elixir to induce euphoria might create battle frenzy rather than calm. A derivative of wolfsbane, tailored not for lycanthropy but for emotional volatility, might allow her to control the storm inside until it boiled over. And then there's the theory of the Blackheart tincture, an extinct alchemical recipe that was once banned by the Unspeakables. According to legend, it made the user immune to moral conflict, physical pain, and memory-based trauma. Side effects included hallucinations, religious delusions, and bloodlust. The last known user, Morgana Flint, disappeared after allegedly drinking it during a ritual. But if Bellatrix found even fragments of the recipe, she could have modified it. With her knowledge, her bloodline, and her ambition, who better? She never showed remorse. Even at her death, when Molly Weasley killed her in a burst of maternal rage, Bellatrix smiled. "What will happen to your children when I'm done with you?" she mocked moments before the curse struck her in the chest. Her body fell without resistance, as if she welcomed death. Some witnesses say she died laughing. The Ministry never tested her blood. Her body was burned, as were many of Voldemort's followers, to prevent relics from being stolen. But there are rumors, spread by former Order members, that her hair was taken by an unnamed unspeakable. That strands of it are still preserved in the Hall of Secrets, being tested against known alchemical agents. Nothing has been confirmed. But if even one vial is found, it could rewrite our understanding of magical enhancement. In the end, Bellatrix Lestrange may have been more than a witch. She might have been an experiment, a creation, a living vessel for ancient elixirs forgotten by time, forbidden by law, and dangerous beyond comprehension. Her madness wasn't weakness, it was armor. Her laughter wasn't joy, it was release. She didn't lose herself in the darkness, she became it. Number 21. Bellatrix secretly despised Lucius Malfoy. Bellatrix Lestrange was not a woman known for subtlety. Her madness wore the mask of fervent loyalty, and her every word seemed soaked in venom and fire. To many, she appeared as the most faithful of Lord Voldemort's followers, a woman who glorified pain and destruction, and whose devotion to the Dark Lord bordered on worship. But behind the curtain of her deranged loyalty and manic laughter, a darker, quieter truth simmered, one that had little to do with Voldemort and everything to do with a man who shared her bloodline by marriage. Lucius Malfoy. Despite being her brother-in-law, Lucius was never treated as family in the way one might expect. Not by Bellatrix. There was always something in her tone when she spoke of him, not just sarcasm, but something colder, sharper, a disdain she did not bother to mask. Bellatrix Lestrange, born of the proud House of Black, raised in a home that glorified purity and dominance, regarded weakness as the greatest sin. And in her eyes, Lucius Malfoy was nothing but a walking monument to weakness. It was in the drawing room of Malfoy Manor that the disdain first broke into the open. The Second Wizarding War was raging, Voldemort had returned, and the Malfoys had offered their grand estate as a headquarters for the Dark Lord's forces. It was a decision that Lucius would come to regret. Stripped of his wand, his dignity, and any semblance of control over his own home, Lucius Malfoy became a shadow of the haughty aristocrat he once was. Bellatrix noticed. She always noticed. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, there is a chilling moment when the group of Death Eaters captures Harry and his friends and brings them to Malfoy Manor. Lucius, desperate to regain favor with Voldemort after his failure at the Department of Mysteries, urges them to confirm the identity of Harry Potter. But it is Bellatrix who steps forward, derisive and biting. "If you are sure, Lucius," she says with a sneer, "wouldn't it be more prudent to summon the Dark Lord?" There is mockery in her voice, not concern, not curiosity, but ridicule, the kind of ridicule one reserves for a child who's failed to perform a simple task. The Department of Mysteries was a turning point. Lucius had led a group of Death Eaters into the heart of the Ministry of Magic, attempting to retrieve the prophecy for the Dark Lord. It was a mission that ended in disaster. The prophecy was destroyed, Death Eaters were captured, and Lucius, disgraced, was imprisoned in Azkaban. Bellatrix, too, had once rotted in Azkaban, but the difference was striking. She had gone to prison with her head held high, screaming Voldemort's name like a hymn. Lucius, in contrast, was dragged into a cell with the weight of failure clinging to him like a foul stench. She never forgave him for that, or more accurately, she never respected him again. According to several fan theories, including those debated on forums like MuggleNet and Reddit's RHP fan theories, Bellatrix viewed Lucius as a coward who clung to Voldemort for the promise of power, not out of genuine belief in the cause. This, for Bellatrix, was blasphemy. To her, the Dark Lord was not merely a leader. He was a savior, a messiah, the embodiment of magic's rightful order. Any man who approached him with anything less than divine reverence was, in her mind, unworthy. And Lucius Malfoy, with his preening vanity and fragile ego, fit that description perfectly. Take, for instance, the scene where Voldemort uses Lucius's wand and breaks it. In Deathly Hallows, Voldemort takes the wand with no explanation, no courtesy. Lucius dares not protest. He merely watches, eyes hollow, shoulders sagging. And in the background, Bellatrix smiles, not with kindness, but with satisfaction. For her, the humiliation of Lucius was a divine act, proof that the Dark Lord saw what she saw, a man broken, used, and discarded. It wasn't always this way. Before Azkaban, before Voldemort's return, there had been an uneasy civility between them. Bellatrix had tolerated Lucius, perhaps even admired his political cunning, in the days when he held sway over the ministry from the shadows. But once the war began in earnest, once lines were drawn in blood and wand fire, Bellatrix had no more patience for men who hesitated. Lucius hesitated repeatedly. Even Narcissa, Bellatrix's sister, sensed the tension. While Bellatrix screamed and duelled and offered her soul to the cause, Narcissa clung to her family, especially her son. And Lucius? He wilted. Bellatrix saw Narcissa's softness as a weakness, but even that she could forgive. After all, Narcissa never claimed to be a soldier. But Lucius? Lucius had pretended to be a warrior. And then he'd failed. In the infamous scene at Malfoy Manor, when Hermione is tortured and the trio is imprisoned in the cellar, Lucius stands in the shadows, quiet and trembling. His hands shake, his voice falters. He cannot control the situation in his own house. Bellatrix, on the other hand, dominates the room like a dark queen. The contrast is so vivid that it becomes comical, if it weren't so tragic. "Do not lie to Lord Voldemort," Bellatrix hisses at Griphook, her wand trembling with barely restrained fury. She is fire. Lucius is ash. This isn't merely a contrast in personality, it's a revelation of values. Bellatrix is utterly devoted, consumed by a belief in the superiority of purebloods and the destiny of the Dark Lord. Lucius, for all his rhetoric, is a man who values comfort, status, and legacy. He fears for his family, not the fall of magical civilization. He wants to survive. Bellatrix wants to destroy. Her contempt deepens with each of his failures. After Voldemort's return, Lucius doesn't regain the power he once had. Instead, he is sidelined. Bellatrix, freshly escaped from Azkaban, is elevated. The Dark Lord calls her by name, values her opinion, rewards her ruthlessness. She is in many ways what Lucius tried to be and failed. That alone would be enough for her to despise him, but it's worse than that. She believes he's faking, that his loyalty is a lie. There is a passage in Half-Blood Prince that fans often cite as evidence. While Narcissa begs Snape to protect Draco, Bellatrix snarls at the room, questioning Snape's loyalty, Lucius's failures, and the incompetence of everyone not kneeling fast enough. She seethes, "You're a clever man, Severus. Surely you must know the Dark Lord's real plan." Her eyes flash when Lucius's name is mentioned. She cannot bear the way others still speak of him with respect. Bellatrix is many things. Mad, violent, cruel, but she is also consistent. Her hatred is reserved for traitors, for weakness, and for those who disgrace the purity of their bloodline with fear. In her mind, Lucius is all three. There's a reason she never defends him, not even when Narcissa weeps, not even when Draco is endangered. Bellatrix never lifts a wand to help her brother-in-law. She fights for Voldemort. She kills for Voldemort. But Lucius, he is not worth her magic. In fan discussions, some have even suggested that Bellatrix considered Lucius an obstacle, a man who sullied the name of Black by marrying Narcissa and turning her into a pawn for politics rather than a warrior for bloodline purity. It's telling that Bellatrix often speaks to Narcissa, not with warmth, but with commands. "You should be proud," she screams. "If I had sons, I would be proud to give them to the cause." The implication is brutal. Lucius has raised Draco to be weak, just like himself. The Malfoy name meant something once, but under Lucius it became synonymous with cowardice, with compromise. Bellatrix, for all her madness, never compromised. She believed in Voldemort's world, would it not as an opportunity, but as a sacred order. Lucius? He believed in Voldemort as long as it served his interests. And when it didn't, he hid. The final insult comes during the Battle of Hogwarts. While Bellatrix duels with Molly Weasley fighting with the fury of a woman possessed, Lucius is nowhere near the front lines. He is searching for his son, not fighting for his cause. He has by then completely abandoned the war. Bellatrix dies in battle. Lucius survives by running. To Bellatrix there was no greater betrayal. Perhaps she never said the words, perhaps she never screamed, "I hate you," across the grand halls of Malfoy Manor. She didn't need to. Her every glance, her every laugh at his expense, her every flicker of satisfaction at his suffering told the story. Bellatrix Lestrange did not simply dislike Lucius Malfoy. She despised him, quietly, deeply, and most of all, righteously. Because in her twisted world of fanatics and killers, where love was weakness and death was devotion, there was no room for men like Lucius Malfoy. Only contempt. Number 22, Bellatrix left behind a secret diary. There are some whispers in Nocturne Alley that never fade, whispers of dark magic, of curses woven into parchment, and of words so dangerous they thrum with power even years after the ink has dried. One of the most persistent legends comes from the ashes of a family already steeped in infamy, the Blacks. After the fall of Voldemort and the death of Bellatrix Lestrange, it was assumed that her madness had died with her. But rumours say she left behind something far worse than her wand, a diary. This theory first emerged from the ranks of the Auras shortly after the war. During a routine sweep of Number 12, Grimold Place, where the Order of the Phoenix had once operated, and where the Black family line had dwindled into obscurity, a junior Aura named Marcellus Heathcliff claimed to have felt a magical echo in the upstairs drawing room. The same room, according to Creature the house elf, where Bellatrix once hid during her rare visits to the ancestral home. She detested the house as much as she worshipped the purity of her bloodline, but she trusted its secrets. Bellatrix Lestrange, born Bellatrix Black, was not merely a fanatic. She was a soldier in Voldemort's private army, a woman who carved her loyalty into the very fabric of her soul. Her screams of laughter during torture were infamous, her name a ghost that clung to the memories of survivors like Neville Longbottom, whose parents were broken under her Cruciatus curse. If Bellatrix had a diary, it would not be a girl's musings, it would be a weapon. "She wants me to prove myself," Bellatrix once hissed to Severus Snape in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Her obsession with Voldemort bordered on the religious. She didn't merely serve him, she adored him. And perhaps that is what makes the idea of her diary so chilling. It would not be an account of guilt or redemption. It would be scripture. Imagine a book filled with spells unknown even to the likes of Horace Slughorn or Phileas Flitwick. Spells that the Ministry had never dared to archive. Words learned at the side of the Dark Lord himself. She was one of his most trusted lieutenants, allowed into rituals and meetings few ever survived. If she had copied those words into parchment, hidden them beneath layers of enchantments, it would not just be dangerous, it would be a resurrection waiting for a reader. Narcissa Malfoy, Bellatrix's sister, was interrogated after the war, not for suspicion of crimes, but because of her close proximity to one of the most dangerous witches who ever lived. According to Aura transcripts, when asked whether Bellatrix kept personal writings, Narcissa replied coldly, "My sister lived through the wand. She wrote only when she wanted something remembered beyond death." The line haunted the investigators. What could Bellatrix want remembered beyond death? Some believe it was Voldemort's final plan, a vision greater than even the Battle of Hogwarts. Others think it was a confession, not of regret, but of her own ambitions. She was the last of his inner circle, after all, to remain fully loyal. "The Dark Lord has no equal," she said once, "but he has a queen. A queen she may have fancied herself, and a queen does not go to the grave without leaving a legacy. If the diary exists, it would almost certainly be cursed, perhaps charmed, to appear as a harmless book of household charms or family genealogy. It may be hidden in plain sight between the cracked leather covers of something unremarkable on the Black family's ancient bookshelves. Hermione Granger once told Harry, "Dark magic leaves traces, and if anyone could find such a trace, it would be her." But in recent interviews, she's avoided the subject altogether. When asked directly in the Daily Prophet if the Order had ever found any writings of Bellatrix, she responded only, "Some things are best left buried." Her eyes did not smile. Kreacher, the house elf, might have known more, but after Harry inherited Grimmauld Place, Kreacher became quieter, less inclined to speak of the past and less directly ordered. In one rare moment, he was overheard muttering about Mistress Bellatrix's Red Book, but when pressed, he claimed to know nothing. Whether this was forgetfulness, fear, or enchantment is anyone's guess. There is another name that has emerged recently, Callista Rawle, a descendant of one of the old Death Eater families. She was arrested in 2007 for attempting to break into Grimmauld Place under the guise of a private historian researching ancient pure-blood lines. The idea that Bellatrix Lestrange, the most loyal Death Eater of all, the woman who would die for the Dark Lord without hesitation, could have ever turned her wand against him, seems absurd at first. And yet somewhere in the darkness of her twisted devotion, something more volatile than love brewed: pride. Bellatrix was not merely a follower. She was his chosen, or at least she believed she was. And in a world where Voldemort discarded the unworthy without a second glance, one has to wonder, what would Bellatrix have done if she had ever been cast aside? From the moment Bellatrix is introduced in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, her obsession with Voldemort is painfully clear. She's not simply loyal, she's enthralled. "The Dark Lord has, in the past, entrusted me with his most precious, his most dangerous secrets," she once whispered, with a mad gleam in her eye. But those secrets were more than knowledge. They were proof of favour, proof that in a world of cowards and incompetents, she was above the rest. She wasn't just serving him, she believed she was chosen by him to serve, to be close, perhaps even to be loved in some dark, twisted way. And love, especially a love so unreciprocated and obsessive, can be a dangerous thing. If it burns too long without being returned, it mutates, it becomes hunger, it becomes entitlement, and, when wounded, it becomes wrath. Those who buy into this theory say that Bellatrix's devotion was not a one-way road to martyrdom. It was conditional, even if she didn't know it herself. Her loyalty existed so long as she was honoured, so long as she was kept close. The moment Voldemort betrayed that sacred bond, should he ever show her that she was just another pawn, she would snap. Let us remember that Bellatrix was no stranger to betrayal or vengeance. Her entire life, before Azkaban, was built on the belief that blood meant superiority, that those who betrayed that belief deserved only death. She tortured the Longbottoms into insanity because they defied her lord, yes, but also because defiance was, to her, a personal insult. She didn't just want obedience to Voldemort, she wanted people to believe what she believed, and when they didn't, she destroyed them with manic glee. Imagine then the scale of the betrayal she'd feel if the one person she had dedicated her soul to discarded her. There's a moment, small but telling, in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, where Narcissa begs Severus Snape to protect Draco. Bellatrix, fuming with jealousy and suspicion, is aghast that Voldemort would entrust Draco with a task of such importance. "The Dark Lord is happy with the plan?" she hisses, doubting that anyone but herself could possibly be worthy of such a mission. But more than that, she doubts Voldemort's judgment for the first time. Why give Draco such power? Why leave Bellatrix in the shadows? This jealousy is the seed, the quiet crack in her devotion. And that seed, if watered with enough neglect, could blossom into fury. Bellatrix didn't crave power in the traditional sense. She wasn't like Lucius, hungry for influence and status. What she wanted was personal, intimate importance to Voldemort. She wanted to be irreplaceable. Her pride lay not in being part of the cause, but in being his weapon, his right hand. If that illusion shattered, if Voldemort ever turned to someone else, say a young, promising witch like Alecto Carrow, Bellatrix would not retreat in tears. No, she would burn. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, there's a moment of terrifying clarity. At Malfoy Manor, when Bellatrix realizes the sword of Gryffindor is missing from Gringotts, she doesn't panic because of the Dark Lord's wrath. She panics because she has failed him. "You dare lie to Lord Voldemort!" she shrieks at Griphook, her voice wild with fear. But it's not fear for herself. It's fear of becoming unworthy in Voldemort's eyes. To be less than perfect in his presence is, for her, a kind of death already. So what would she do if she were truly replaced? Many fans point to the scene at the Battle of Hogwarts, her last moments, as evidence that Bellatrix was unraveling. She fought not with strategy, but with desperation. When Molly Weasley duels her, Bellatrix doesn't back away. She taunts, she toys, she loses control. "What will happen to your children when I've killed you?" She sneers. She's manic, unhinged. And when Molly finally strikes the fatal blow, Bellatrix is laughing. Not a laugh of victory, but of pure, blind madness. Some interpret this as a woman already broken, perhaps because, by then, Voldemort had already begun to ignore her. In fact, in those final hours, Voldemort barely speaks to her. His attention is elsewhere, on Harry, on the Elder Wand. Bellatrix is no longer his focus. She remains by his side, yes, but as a shadow, a leftover. To a woman like Bellatrix, invisibility was the cruelest insult. She was raised in the noble house of Black, taught that her blood made her superior. Her pride, though twisted, was deeply rooted. If Voldemort had replaced her in his inner circle, or worse, treated her like a tool rather than a confidant, it's not far-fetched to think she might have turned on him. Of course, this theory hinges on one central truth. Bellatrix could have done it. The question isn't just would she, but could she? Did she have the power, the audacity, the sheer recklessness to raise her wand against the most feared wizard of the age? The answer lies in her history. She fought Kingsley Shacklebolt, Nymphadora Tonks, and Sirius Black without hesitation. She stared death in the face dozens of times. She was reckless, yes, but never weak. Bellatrix, more than anyone, understood the stakes of war. She didn't fear death. She feared irrelevance. And there is another piece to this puzzle, a scene often overlooked. In the Department of Mysteries, when she duels with Sirius, her laughter turns to something darker. When she kills him, her reaction is not triumphant. It's obsessive. "I killed Sirius Black," she screams. "Did you hear me? I killed Sirius Black." But the words aren't for Harry, they're for Voldemort. She needs him to know what she's done. She craves his praise more than anything else. Her self-worth is entirely tied to how he sees her. If he stops seeing her at all, what then? Some theorists even suggest that Bellatrix, had she survived longer, might have sought out one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, not to protect it, but to destroy it. Not out of heroism, but vengeance, to break him as he had broken her. Because what is more satisfying to the betrayed than revenge cloaked in symbolic destruction? Imagine her finding the locket, whispering his name with venom as she smashes it. "You made me your monster," she'd say. "Now let me make you mortal." This theory paints Bellatrix not as a mindless follower, but as a tragic figure. Obsessive, yes, but not entirely blind. And if we look closely, even Rowling hints that Bellatrix was more than just a fanatic. In The Cursed Child, we learn she bore a child, Delphi, allegedly with Voldemort himself. Whether or not one accepts this controversial addition to canon, it reinforces the idea that Bellatrix saw herself as his equal in some way. She believed she had earned more than loyalty. She had earned legacy. To be tossed aside after that? Unthinkable. In this light, Bellatrix's potential betrayal becomes less of a betrayal and more of a reclamation. A reclaiming of identity, of pride, of self. For years, she had allowed her soul to be devoured by the image of Voldemort. But if that image ever reflected back rejection, her response wouldn't have been weeping. It would have been wrath. She was not born to be discarded. She was born to dominate or destroy. Even Dumbledore once said, "Indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright dislike." Bellatrix would not have survived Voldemort's indifference, his hatred perhaps. But his cold dismissal? That would have been the final spell. And like a dragon wounded by its own master, Bellatrix would have turned, even knowing the fire would consume them both. And perhaps that is why Voldemort never truly gave her what she wanted. He kept her close, but not too close, powerful, but not equal. He understood her madness better than anyone. He knew that to give her too much power or too little would end in ruin. She was, in the end, his most dangerous follower, not because of her strength, but because of her heart, a heart that beat only for him, until the day it might have stopped altogether. So yes, it sounds wild, the idea that Bellatrix Lestrange, Voldemort's most fanatical servant, could have lifted her wand with the intent to kill him. But in the quiet hours of rejection, in the lonely corners of obsession, betrayal often brews. Not in the hands of enemies, but in the hearts of lovers who were never loved back. Bellatrix, after all, was not just a Death Eater. She was a woman, burning, and even fire has its limits before it devours its own source. Number 24. Azkaban enhanced Bellatrix's magical powers. Of all the horrors known in the wizarding world, few places chill the blood like Azkaban. Built on an isle surrounded by icy waves and despair, it breaks most who enter. Most, but not all. There are rare, frightening exceptions, and none are more haunting than Bellatrix Lestrange. When she emerged after 14 years locked away, she had not withered. She had transformed, hardened, sharpened, empowered. Some whisper Azkaban drained her humanity. Others believe it forged a weapon of magical destruction. Could it be that the darkness of Azkaban didn't merely fail to extinguish her magic, it made her stronger? Bellatrix was already infamous when she was sentenced. Her cruelty during Voldemort's first reign was unmatched. The torture of Frank and Alice Longbottom alone proved her willingness to channel dark magic without restraint. But the woman who stood in the courtroom after her capture, screaming loyalty to the Dark Lord even as she was led away, was different from the one who would later duel Hermione Granger, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and Molly Weasley. She evolved in that prison. "The Lestranges should stand trial," said Dumbledore in Order of the Phoenix, "but the evidence is clear." She was sent away with no hint of regret, no fear, only obsession in her voice. There's something to be said about the impact of 14 years in Azkaban. It is not time, it is torment. The presence of Dementors, creatures that feed on the soul, turns memories into nightmares and happiness into ash. But Bellatrix was no ordinary prisoner. Unlike others who faded into shadows of themselves, she kept her sense of self fiercely intact. "The Dark Lord will rise again," she shouted as she was dragged from the courtroom, "and I shall be by his side." Goblet of fire. That defiance would become her armor. When she escaped during the mass breakout in Order of the Phoenix, she was described as gaunt and wild-eyed, but her wand hand was still sure. She duelled in the Department of Mysteries with the skill and fury of someone who had never missed a day of dark practice. Her battle against Sirius Black wasn't cautious, it was predatory. Come out, little doggy," she sang as she pursued him. Her spell didn't just knock Sirius through the veil, it was cast with lethal precision. Years in prison had not dulled her focus. If anything, it had enhanced it. How? Some fans argue that she learned to feed off the pain, that instead of allowing the Dementors to drain her spirit, she turned their presence into fuel for her anger. Pain was her teacher, loneliness her companion, despair her whetstone. She used what would destroy others as raw material for power. In Half-Blood Prince, Snape warns Narcissa, "The Dark Lord trusts me. Bellatrix still thinks I'm playing both sides." Bellatrix had become a creature of suspicion and fury. Her instincts were sharper, her hatred purified. It's worth noting that Voldemort himself valued her more after her return. She became his most loyal servant, entrusted with training Draco Malfoy in the dark arts and accompanying Narcissa to Spinner's End. This was not the same Bellatrix who once stood trial in chains. This was a woman whose very aura crackled with magic. In Malfoy Manor, she ruled with fear. Even the Snatchers hesitated before her. Hermione bore the brunt of her sadism when Bellatrix tortured her, not just for information, but to punish her blood. It was not just an act of violence, it was a display of control. The most telling moment came at the Battle of Hogwarts. Bellatrix fought with such ferocity that even experienced duelists struggled. She faced Kingsley Shacklebolt, Horace Slughorn, and Molly Weasley in rapid succession. And though she ultimately fell to Molly's spell, "Not my daughter, you bitch," her earlier duels showed the extent of her power. Molly was driven by maternal rage, but Bellatrix was powered by something darker, something forged in shadow. What happened in Azkaban then? Was it madness that gave her strength, or was it discipline? Perhaps she developed a method, a ritual, to survive. Imagine her whispering curses in the dark, perfecting nonverbal spells, sharpening incantations not with her wand, but in her mind. Perhaps she relived the torture of the Longbottoms over and over, not as guilt, but as a mantra. Each repetition solidifying her identity as a weapon of Voldemort's will. And remember, Bellatrix was a Black, raised in a pureblood family obsessed with power. She wasn't taught to break, she was taught to dominate. Her will, tested by isolation, remained unshaken. Sirius, her cousin, fell to despair. But Bellatrix, she became her truest self in prison. The cold stripped away everything unnecessary, vanity, patience, pretense. What remained was pure, unfiltered obsession. Dumbledore once said, "It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." But Bellatrix chose loyalty to Voldemort even in chains, and with that choice, she may have created a source of internal power no spell could rival. Every Dementor that floated past her cell, draining joy and light, also reminded her of the world she hated, the world of mudbloods, auras, and ministry lies. And she swore vengeance. Her magic was different after Azkaban, less theatrical, more brutal. She didn't cast the Cruciatus curse with the same flair she once had. She did it with hunger, as if each scream she extracted healed the years of silence. When she struck Sirius down, it wasn't rage, it was execution, a clean, final punishment for betrayal. She didn't mourn the cousin she once shared a childhood with. She celebrated. In Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione are captured and taken to Malfoy Manor, Bellatrix becomes a different kind of monster. The way she questions Hermione about Godric Gryffindor's sword, slashing her arm, threatening more, reveals a woman who has become intimate with suffering. But not as a victim, as an artist. Bellatrix doesn't ask questions like a Death Eater. She interrogates like a master of psychological warfare. Azkaban didn't only affect her mind, it affected her magic. Wands, we're told, have personalities, but in skilled hands, even another's wand can be lethal. Bellatrix, reunited with her own wand, wielded it like a part of her soul. Her spells came faster, harder, darker. The fact that she survived multiple duels, including against Aurors like Tonks and Kingsley, shows a stamina that borders on the supernatural. Most Death Eaters were powerful. Bellatrix was unstoppable until she met a mother's wrath. Even Voldemort noticed her strength. She was the only female Death Eater he truly trusted. At the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, she was the last one standing. When he appeared, it was to save her, not Lucius, not Dolohov, her. In Order of the Phoenix, after Voldemort flees, Bellatrix screams as he grabs her, disapparating from danger. That's not loyalty, that's favoritism. She was more than a follower, she was his chosen warrior. There's poetic horror in the idea that Azkaban was her crucible. While others crumbled, she ascended. Stripped of freedom, food, warmth, and joy, she found something else. Purpose. And purpose, dark as it was, became power. She became a nightmare, not in spite of her suffering, but because of it. Was she mad? Certainly. But it was a focused madness, a harnessed madness. She did not shout nonsense or stare at walls. She plotted, she remembered. She built herself piece by piece in that cell. And when the walls finally opened, she didn't step out. She stormed into battle, a force of destruction reborn from silence. Neville Longbottom, the boy orphaned by her hand, faced her years later in Deathly Hallows. He didn't see a prisoner. He saw a monster. His fear was justified. Bellatrix didn't flinch. She laughed. "Neville Longbottom," she sneered. "How's Mummy and Daddy?" That wasn't just taunt. That was dominance, a reminder that she had broken his family and would break him too if allowed. But she underestimated one thing: love. Her final defeat came not from a curse more powerful than hers, but from a mother's scream. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" Molly's spell hit like fate itself, because if pain gave Bellatrix power, then love gave Molly something greater, something Azkaban could never understand. Still, even in death, Bellatrix's legacy lingers, not just in her cruelty or her loyalty, but in her terrifying transformation. Azkaban tried to destroy her soul. Instead, it refined it. She walked out of that fortress not as a woman but as a weapon, an unholy example of what happens when darkness finds a vessel strong enough to survive it. Number 25. Bellatrix wore an artifact that protected her from most spells. Bellatrix Lestrange, née Black, was not just a powerful witch. She was a phenomenon on the battlefield. Her duels during the Second Wizarding War were nothing short of theatrical, often leaving her adversaries bewildered and defeated. Fans of the Harry Potter series have long debated how she managed to survive so many encounters unscathed. Despite facing formidable opponents like Nymphadora Tonks, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and even Hermione Granger, Bellatrix emerged time and time again without so much as a scratch. While her skill and madness were undeniable, some believe there was another force at play, an ancient magical artifact hidden in plain sight that shielded her from harm. This theory, though not explicitly confirmed in J.K. Rowling's canon, has gained significant traction among readers. One of the most intriguing suggestions is that Bellatrix wore a protective heirloom from the noble and most ancient House of Black, possibly a brooch, ring, or amulet, infused with dark enchantments, passed down through generations. The Black family was notorious for preserving powerful relics, often laced with magic, that defied even the understanding of contemporary wizards. As Sirius Black once said, "My parents were obsessed with blood purity and old traditions. They hoarded heirlooms like they were holy." If Bellatrix inherited one such object, it would explain the unnatural resistance she demonstrated in battle. Take, for instance, the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. Bellatrix faced no fewer than 5 adult members of the Order of the Phoenix, including experienced duelists like Remus Lupin and Mad-Eye Moody. And yet, while the others suffered injuries or had to fall back, Bellatrix danced through the chaos, casting unforgivable curses and deflecting spells with eerie precision. When Sirius attempted to stop her, he was struck squarely in the chest and fell through the veil. Dead, Bellatrix, laughing wildly, vanished into the shadows without a single visible wound. It's as if the magic aimed at her simply slid off her like water on glass. Her most revealing encounter, however, may have occurred during the Battle of Hogwarts. There, she stood alone against 3 of the fiercest witches of her time, Hermione Granger, Ginny Weasley, and Luna Lovegood. Despite their combined strength, intelligence, and bravery, they were no match for Bellatrix. The text notes, Bellatrix was still fighting besides 3 other Death Eaters, and no one seemed able to subdue her. These were not inexperienced students. Hermione had fought Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries, Luna had resisted torture in the dungeons of Malfoy Manor, and Ginny was known for her fierce determination. Yet Bellatrix overpowered them. What makes this even more curious is that the books never describe Bellatrix being injured. We never read of her limping, wincing, or even bruised. The only time she is truly at risk is during her final confrontation with Molly Weasley. And even then it's worth noting how unusually long she holds her own against Molly, a powerful witch but not known for dueling. Bellatrix laughed, the same exhilarated laugh her cousin Sirius had given as he toppled backward through the veil, the book says, even as she and Molly exchanged curses that lit up the great hall like a fireworks display. For a brief moment, it seemed like she might even win. But then Molly, driven by a mother's rage, found her mark. The shield shattered, the spell hit home. Bellatrix was no more. The idea that Bellatrix was protected by a magical object may also be rooted in visual storytelling. In the films, Helena Bonham Carter wears a large, ornate ring on her left hand and an intricate brooch pinned to her dress. While no attention is drawn to these accessories, they are ever present, subtle, silent, and sinister. The ring, in particular, bears resemblance to ancient symbols associated with protection and bloodline magic. Could this have been a conscious decision by the filmmakers to allude to an invisible shield, or perhaps an Easter egg for the keen-eyed viewer? There's also historical precedence in the Harry Potter universe for objects like this. The Gaunt family ring, which belonged to Voldemort's grandfather, carried a deadly curse strong enough to wither Dumbledore's hand. Salazar Slytherin's locket caused intense psychological distress and even physical illness to those who wore it. The concept of enchanted heirlooms, often tied to dark magic, is well established. It is not a stretch to imagine that the Black family, proud descendants of the oldest pure blood lines, would possess artifacts of similar nature. The House of Black was steeped in ancient rites and obscure spells. Walburga Black, Bellatrix's aunt, famously blasted the names of any blood traitors off the family tapestry, showing a fanatical reverence for tradition. In such a family, objects weren't just items, they were legacies. Passed from one witch to another, these objects absorbed enchantments and history alike. Bellatrix, as the most zealous of them all, would have been a natural recipient of such a treasure. Whether it was gifted to her upon taking the Dark Mark or inherited from her mother, Druella Rosier, the artifact could have been imbued with shielding spells designed to protect the bearer from magical harm. Let's not forget the connection between Bellatrix and ancient magic. She was not an ordinary Death Eater. She had trained under Voldemort himself, and he trusted her with the inner workings of his plans. Unlike Lucius Malfoy, who fell out of favor, or Severus Snape, who played a dangerous double game, Bellatrix remained his most loyal and fanatical follower. It's possible Voldemort himself enchanted the item to keep her alive, perhaps seeing her as a last line of defense, or simply indulging the madness of the one person he knew would die for him without hesitation. Then there is the idea that the artifact did not merely repel spells, it absorbed them. Imagine a charm so powerful that each curse flung at Bellatrix only made her stronger, feeding her fury. This would explain her growing ferocity in battle and the look of wild exhilaration she wore during duels. Like a storm-gathering energy, Bellatrix may have been channeling the very power meant to destroy her. In this light, her final moment becomes poetic. When the artifact finally fails, it's not because it's weak, but because Molly's curse bypasses magic and strikes at something far more primal, the bond between mother and child. Intriguingly, there are hints in the books that suggest even the other Death Eaters regarded her with a mix of awe and fear. When Voldemort breaks into the Ministry during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, it is Bellatrix who stands by his side. The only one who mattered was Bellatrix, Rowling writes. This closeness implies that she may have had access to magical resources others did not. It's telling that Voldemort never punished her with the Cruciatus curse, as he did with others. He valued her survival. He may have ensured it with magic. Furthermore, the possibility that this object was cursed as well as enchanted adds a layer of tragic irony to Bellatrix's life. Perhaps the artifact protected her body but not her soul. Maybe it preserved her life in exchange for her sanity. That would explain her descent into fanaticism, her sadism, her glee at the suffering of others. She was not just serving the Dark Lord. She was enslaved by an object that demanded blood to function. A dark relic that whispered to her, promising invincibility in exchange for morality. Could this be why she tortured the Longbottoms to insanity? Not just to please Voldemort, but to feed the artifact? In Order of the Phoenix, Neville says, "She's mad. My parents were Aurors, and she tortured them, just because they wouldn't tell her where Voldemort was." But what if there was more? What if each scream was a sacrifice, empowering her talisman, binding her deeper into a pact she could never escape? Some believe that the object could still exist, buried in the ruins of Malfoy Manor or hidden within the vaults of Gringotts. A cursed ring lost in time, humming with residual power, waiting for the next bearer. Others suggest it may have been destroyed with Bellatrix, its magic undone by her death. But the possibility that such an artifact existed adds another dimension to her character, not merely a madwoman, but a vessel for a darker force, one bound to the legacy of the Black family. If J.K. Rowling ever confirms this theory, it would align with many of the themes she has woven into the series: the danger of obsession, the price of power, and the haunting legacy of pure blood pride. It would explain why Bellatrix fought like a demon, why she laughed in the face of death, and why, in the end, only a mother's love could destroy her. Until then, the mystery endures. Fans continue to revisit scenes, analyze every accessory, every line of dialogue, every cryptic detail. Somewhere in those pages, between the flick of a wand and the glint of a ring, may lie the truth about the unbreakable witch who burned with madness and something else, something ancient, something hidden, something cursed. Number 26, Bellatrix suffered from a curse that made her lose her mind. Bellatrix Lestrange wasn't always the mad woman we remember from the Battle of Hogwarts. Long before her chilling cackle echoed through the halls of the Department of Mysteries, before she tortured Hermione Granger at Malfoy Manor, before she declared her devotion to the Dark Lord with wide, manic eyes, there may have been something else. A whisper beneath the madness, a hidden truth lost beneath layers of magic and time. Some believe she was cursed, not metaphorically, but literally. A spell, dark and ancient, might have nested within her soul, slowly turning her brilliance into hysteria. Bellatrix was born Bellatrix Black, eldest daughter of Tignus and Druella of the noble and most ancient House of Black. In her youth, she was poised, graceful, and powerful. There were whispers in the pure blood circles about her talent at Hogwarts. Even Horace Slughorn, a professor not easily impressed, once commented on her potential. Oh yes, the Black girls. Andromeda, Bellatrix, Narcissa. Such different paths, he mused during a dinner party, swirling his wine. But Bellatrix, she had fire and brilliance. A shame what she became. What she became, that's the question, isn't it? Because if you look closely, you can see the unraveling didn't start with Azkaban. It began before, in tiny, almost imperceptible ways. Her letters to her sisters, i.e. preserved in the Black family vault at Gringotts, shift in tone over the years. Early on they are sharp, witty, clever. But after her initiation into Voldemort's circle, something changes. Her handwriting grows erratic. Her sentences lose structure. She begins to fixate not on politics or family honor, but on Voldemort himself. She talks about him like he's a god, Andromeda once said, years later in hiding. Not a man. It frightened me. She wasn't always like that. Some fans argue that Bellatrix's descent into madness was a direct result of her time in Azkaban. 12 years in a cell surrounded by Dementors would crush even the strongest mind. But others believe she was already teetering on the edge long before, and Azkaban merely completed the fall. The more unsettling theory is that she didn't fall on her own. She was pushed, or cursed. Voldemort was known to use dark enchantments to control his followers. He carved the dark mark into their very skin, branding them not just physically but magically. But what if Bellatrix, who was perhaps his most loyal servant, had something more sinister placed upon her? What if her devotion was not entirely of her own making? There's an obscure entry in Magic Most Evil, a volume once kept in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, that speaks of a curse known as Veneficus Mentis, a spell used in ancient times to warp the mind of an enemy, slowly twisting their loyalty, emotions, and sanity until they became a puppet of the caster. It was not instantaneous like the Imperius Curse, but far more insidious. It didn't control the body, it reshaped the soul. The spell was so dangerous that the Ministry of Magic declared it a Class A forbidden curse in 1647. The only known modern reference to it came during the trial of Rabastan Lestrange in 1982. When questioned about his unwavering devotion to Voldemort, even after the Dark Lord's fall, Rabastan muttered in a trance-like voice, "He lives in our heads. He planted things. You don't understand. It wasn't all me." But it is Bellatrix who shows the clearest signs of Veneficus Mentis. Her manic behavior, her delusional grandeur, her refusal to accept Voldemort's death after the First War, when others fled or tried to reintegrate into society, she remained defiantly loyal. "The Dark Lord will rise again, Crouch. Throw us into Azkaban. We are his loyal servants," she screamed during her trial, wild-eyed, as if the truth of his return burned in her veins. And then, of course, there's her laughter, that eerie, unhinged laughter. It recurs in every one of her major scenes. When she kills Sirius Black, she lets out a scream of triumph, then laughs. In Half-Blood Prince, she cackles madly as she and Greyback burn Hagrid's hut. Even as she duels Molly Weasley, she is smiling. "You will never touch our children again," Molly shrieks. But Bellatrix only laughs. No normal mind behaves like this. Even other Death Eaters, Lucius Malfoy for example, remained calculating, measured. Bellatrix was something else, something that even Voldemort seemed to regard with caution. He allowed her closeness, yes, but when she became too frenzied, too possessive, he would quiet her with a look. Some believe the curse was cast by Voldemort himself, a way to ensure Bellatrix's unwavering loyalty. Perhaps he feared the House of Black's reputation for rebellion. After all, Sirius betrayed his family. Andromeda married a Muggle-born. Regulus defected. Only Bellatrix remained. And so Voldemort might have bound her mind to his will, not through trust, but through hexes. Others suggest a more ancient source. The Black family, steeped in dark magic for centuries, had enemies. One such enemy may have cursed Bellatrix as a child, perhaps a distant relative, like Phineas Nigellus's forgotten brother, whose name was erased from the family tree after his marriage to a Muggle. There are rumours, mostly found in dusty corners of fan archives, that speak of an heir's curse placed on the eldest daughters of traitors. It would not manifest until adolescence, and would slowly degrade the mind over decades. One theory ties this idea to the family's vault at Gringotts. It's known that the vault contained not only treasures, but cursed objects. The cup of Helga Hufflepuff among them. Exposure to such a Horcrux, and especially over time, might have unhinged even the most disciplined witch. Dumbledore explained in The Half-Blood Prince that Horcruxes exert a terrible influence over those in their vicinity. They warp the soul and amplify the darkest traits. If Bellatrix handled the cup often, as the family matriarch, she might have unknowingly suffered its effects for years. Even her own family distanced themselves from her madness. Narcissa, though loyal, kept her distance. During the events at Malfoy Manor, she often recoiled from Bellatrix's outbursts, and Draco, who respected his aunt, clearly feared her. "Aunt Bella says I'm not ready," he once muttered to Snape, eyes shadowed with unease. "She says I don't understand real magic." Then there is the question of love, or rather, obsession. Bellatrix's desire for Voldemort was beyond loyalty. It bordered on madness. She served him with the fervour of a disciple, but her eyes spoke of something deeper. In The Cursed Child, it is revealed she bore his child, Delphine. This opens an entirely new layer of tragedy. Was she truly in love, or merely a vessel, so consumed by the curse that she no longer knew where Voldemort ended and she began? Some say her eyes were the key. Those who met her gaze often reported a kind of emptiness, not like a blank slate, but like a person standing at the edge of a cliff, forever on the verge of falling. "She looked at me as if I wasn't real," said Tonks in an Aura report, "as if I was a dream, and she was wide awake in a nightmare." We must also consider how her death unfolded. Bellatrix died laughing, dueling Molly Weasley, hurling curses with wild delight. She was fast, lethal, and seemed invincible, but in the end a mother's rage broke through the fog of her madness. The final blow struck not just her body, but her illusion of control. In her last moment perhaps there was clarity, a flash in her eyes, not of hatred, but confusion. Was she surprised to die, or was she surprised to feel anything at all? Whatever the truth, Bellatrix Lestrange remains one of the most tragic figures of the Second Wizarding War. Not because she killed, but because she was perhaps not entirely in control of what she had become. Her madness may have been inflicted. A curse, like a parasite, had fed on her potential and left only chaos behind. As Harry once said of another tortured soul, it's not our abilities that show what we truly are, it's our choices. But what if Bellatrix never had a choice? What if her choices were illusions, carefully orchestrated by magic, older than even Dumbledore? Some truths are buried too deep, but every time we hear that mad laughter echoing off stone walls and forgotten pages, we wonder, was she mad or was she made mad? Number 27. Bellatrix was a descendant of the legendary dark witch Morgana Lefay. The wand moved through the air with an unnatural grace, carving ancient symbols in the shadows. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't just cast spells, she unleashed them. Her magic was visceral, almost alive, not merely studied, but born in her blood. That blood, some whisper, may carry the remnants of a far older and darker legacy than even the House of Black dares to admit. They say she is the last daughter of the first great dark sorceress, Morgana Lefay, sister of King Arthur, nemesis of Merlin, and queen of forbidden enchantment. This theory, dismissed by many as romantic nonsense, refuses to die. In dusty corners of old wizarding libraries and in whispers among pure-blood circles, the name Morgana still carries weight. Unlike Merlin, whose legacy is gilded in school curriculums and ministry plaques, Morgana's name is met with shudders and mutterings. She was the woman who defied the establishment of her time, who mastered magics that even the most ambitious wizards today fear to study. Her magic was deep, elemental, and utterly without remorse. And if the old stories are true, her bloodline was never broken. The House of Black, as every Hogwarts student, once forced to memorize their family trees in Muggle studies, boasts that it is the last of the sacred 28, the purest of purebloods. Their motto, Toujours Pur, reflects not only an obsession with blood purity, but also a fierce pride in their ancestral ties to the ancient magical dynasties of the British Isles. Names like Ignotus Peverell, Salazar Slytherin, and even Antioch the Elder appear whispered in black family corners. But if one legend is true above all, it's the tale of Zenobia Black, a witch said to have lived in the 9th century and claimed to be the granddaughter of Morgana Lefay herself. Zenobia's existence was always treated with skepticism until a sealed black family grimoire surfaced in 1934 at an estate auction in Wiltshire. The pages, bound in dragon hide and sealed with magic older than any ministry-recognized signature, spoke of the sacred blood of the Dark Queen that runs true in the veins of her chosen. Scholars from the Department of Mysteries were never granted access, but Cygnus Black III, Bellatrix's father, publicly boasted that their lineage stretched to the dawn of British sorcery. The timing and the content hint at more than just family arrogance. They hint at a terrible truth passed from mother to daughter. Bellatrix never spoke of her ancestors. She didn't need to. Her magic spoke for her. As Sirius Black once told Harry, "You've never seen true cruelty until you've seen Bellatrix smile." Order of the Phoenix. Her magic had a quality that even the Death Eaters found unsettling. She didn't use the Cruciatus curse. She sang it. She painted the pain across her victims like a demented artist. But even more disturbing was how her spells often bent reality in unpredictable ways. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, her duel with Kingsley Shacklebolt left him stunned not by the power of her curses, but by their complexity. "She cast something I couldn't even identify," he confessed later. "It felt ancient." Ancient. That word returns again and again in conversations about Bellatrix, the kind of magic that doesn't simply manipulate the world, but warps it, as Morgana was said to do. In the tales told by goblin bards and forbidden French grimoires, Morgana would speak to the moon, command the wind, and bring madness to men with just a gesture. One tale even speaks of her making Avalon disappear, hiding the entire island from the eyes of time. Bellatrix, too, had that unnerving aura, her movements unnatural, her voice both commanding and dissonant. Her duels weren't fights, they were performances. The idea that Bellatrix is Morgana's descendant also adds new depth to her relationship with Voldemort. It is no secret that she adored him, loved him even. But what if it was more than love? What if it was recognition? As if she saw in Voldemort not merely a leader, but a rival heir of darkness. Morgana, according to old Cornish legends, believed that no man should wield ultimate magical power, that only women, bound by blood to the earth, could truly control it. If this belief had trickled down through the centuries, it might explain Bellatrix's fanaticism, not just loyalty, but a twisted desire to reclaim the throne of shadow from a usurper. There is one passage in the Malleus Maleficarum, an ancient and controversial wizarding text, which speaks of a line of witches marked by silver fire in their eyes and a voice that bends the will of creatures. Those who met Bellatrix in Azkaban described her stare as like looking into a storm. Even her cousin Sirius, in one rare, unguarded moment, told Remus Lupin, "Bella wasn't born evil, she was born wrong, like something had been waiting too long inside her." Morgana Le Fay was also described that way, her birth marked by storms, her first cries, said to have cracked the castle walls at Tintagel. Skeptics point to the lack of records. But this is precisely what one might expect if the descendants of Morgana were hiding. The Black family was notorious for burning records, removing names from tapestries, and vanishing branches of the family tree that strayed from the path. If the Morgana bloodline was considered cursed or dangerous, it would have been hidden behind layers of false marriages and altered names. Even Walburga Black, keeper of the infamous screaming portrait, was known to forbid the mention of certain ancestral lines in front of guests. There is also the matter of wand lore. Bellatrix's wand, 12 3/4 inches, walnut, dragon heartstring, was described by Ollivander as unyielding. He never commented further, but in a private letter recovered after his disappearance, Ollivander noted, "Some wands take on more than a partner. They take on a soul. Hers felt haunted." Morgana's wand, if the legends are true, was carved from the wood of the first tree struck by lightning on Avalon and contained a core made of unicorn blood mixed with her own. The concept of a wand bearing the user's essence predates modern wand lore and fits perfectly with the idea of a magic passed through blood. The strongest link, however, comes not from magic, but from madness. Morgana, in the later Arthurian tales, descended into instability, her mind a storm of visions and anger. Bellatrix, too, was unhinged, but not senseless. Her madness was too sharp, too aware. In Half-Blood Prince, she tells Snape, "You dare speak his name with your unworthy mouth, you filthy half-blood." The venom in her words was not that of blind loyalty, it was of someone guarding a legacy. Her hatred wasn't just for Muggleborns, it was for pretenders, usurpers, those not worthy of the old magic. And then there's the mirror. In Grimmauld Place, behind the heavy curtains and cursed portraits, there's an ancient blackened mirror covered in symbols no Hogwarts teacher could translate. Dumbledore, in his youth, reportedly visited the Black family home and spent hours studying it. He later wrote in a letter to Elphias Doge, "That mirror is older than Hogwarts. It sees not who you are, but the shadow that walks behind you." If it did come from Morgana, as some suspect, then it watched Bellatrix grow up. Perhaps it whispered to her at night. Perhaps it reminded her of who she was meant to be. Even the Death Eaters feared her. Lucius Malfoy, a man of calculated cruelty, once avoided dueling beside Bellatrix, muttering, "She draws chaos like a flame draws moths." She didn't just kill, she unmade. Alice and Frank Longbottom were not merely tortured, they were shattered. Madness became a gift she delivered. That echoes Morgana again, who once, according to Breton folklore, turned an entire Roman battalion mad with a song. Of course, the Ministry would never acknowledge such a connection. To admit that such a legacy still breathes in wizarding veins would be to admit how fragile their control really is. But some unspeakables, retired and disgraced, have hinted that the Hall of Prophecy once held an orb labelled the last daughter of the lake. It was removed the same year Bellatrix escaped Azkaban,